Okay, so UV mapping. What is UV mapping? When I came to this lecture, I thought this is going to be one of the hardest ones to describe, and I still think that now. So let me know if I don't explain it right in the comments, and I'll embellish if necessary. So basically, UV coordinate system, UVW in fact, is a mathematical system that the game engine or your 3D Studio Max or other 3D application uses to apply 2D imagery onto the surfaces of polygons. Now we know what a polygon is, obviously. That's a polygon. That's a polygon. That's one. Just like your geometry has a coordinate system for, your vertices. Well, the textures that apply to the surface of polygons needs a coordinate system also. UVW doesn't actually stand for anything, as far as I know. If I've got that wrong, let me know. But basically, the story goes that XYZ was taken for points in space and for geometry, so they used UVW, 3 letters before XYZ, for the coordinate system for textures, for your mapping coordinate system. So that's what UVWs are. It's a mapping coordinate system for your textures, your surface of your geometry. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to apply a texture to this surface, how would I do that? How can I put a 2D image onto here? Okay, well, I've got a 2D image here, and you can see it's all nicely laid out, and I'm going to apply this to that box, and you can see I've laid it out into nice squares, each square representing a side on the box. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, not in any particular order, just that's how I drew it and that's how I laid it out. So what you have to do is you have to look at your object and you have to tell your object where your UV coordinate systems are. So if I go to unwrap and I go to open UV editor, you'll never see the W part really. You'll never use or see the W part of the UVW. Really, it's just UV. That's why you always see UV mapping and UV coordinates and what have you. You never really see the W part because it's used internally. Like for example, looking at this box, the W would be going into along the surface here, not, and the UV is the X and the Y, which is X along the bottom. So let me get my image. So X would be this way and Y would be that way. So that's your UV, and your W is into the like your Z basically. So you've UV. So I've unwrapped this. I've already prepared it, and I'm going to show you how to do all that stuff later on, because there's lots of ways you can what we call unwrap a 3D object. Every 3D object, no matter how complex it is, needs to have UVWs. And here you can see I've unwrapped this box into a 2D space. So each square on this box is represented in UV coordinates here on this plane here. So the whole UV coordinates for my box has got to fit inside this box here. If you don't do that, it begins to tile. I'll explain what tiling is after. So all of my coordinate systems got to fit inside this box here, and this box here represents my image, basically my texture, my 2D image that I'm going to apply to this object here. So if I can actually look, I can in Max, don't worry about what I'm doing, just think about the idea of UV mapping, the things I'm describing. Don't worry about the actual mechanics of actually doing all this yet. I'm going to show you it as we go along. I just want you to understand what UV mapping is. So in Max, it lets you see your 2D image in this UVW window. If I go and choose that, there. So there's my image, and you can see I've already positioned my UVWs for each of these boxes in this space here. I've already, what they call, unwrapped this image. So if I switch on this, I've already applied it, you just can't see it, I've just turned it off. So if I switch it on, you can see that each box has got one of these on inside it. If I select it, you'll see that each one is selected. If I do 5, you can see 5 here is highlighted. 4 went at the bottom, 1 in the side there, 2 and 3. A good way to think about it is the rooms in your house, where you live, the surface of the walls. Imagine them as a 3D object, and your brother or sister wants you to put a poster up onto the wall. Well, if your brother or sister said to you, I want it a foot down from the top and 3 feet along the wall, I want you to put it there, the top corner, I want you to position it right there so as it fits on the wall nicely. That's exactly the same idea. That's UV mapping, essentially, in its most simplistic form, obviously. So that's what we've done here. I've basically got my image and I've stuck that portion of my image onto that part of the box. To do that, I've unwrapped that box, I've applied UVs to this object, and I've given the space on that box here, where number 3 is, that space on my image. So there's a correlation. I've told it that whatever sits in this space of my image is going to be there. Now I can demonstrate how that could go wrong. So if I move my coordinate system over here on my image, because this is the UV editor, so you can move your UVs around on top of your image. So if I do this, for example, watch what it does. Where's number 4 on there? So number 4 has gone wrong because I've now told 3D Studio that the corner of that box sits there on my image, when in fact it doesn't. It's up there because I'll have to change my image to match that if I wanted to keep it like that, and I can move that back. See, as I move it around, you can see it's moving. So I can do that with any one of them. So number 2, I can pull that onto number 5 and it gets the 5 on my box. So that's basically what UV mapping is. It's a system that allows you to apply 2D images to your 3D objects in a mathematical way, basically. Very simplistic, and it might seem complicated now, but once you get the hang of it, once you get your head around it, it's very straightforward. All objects, no matter what shape, have UV coordinate system. And when you build an object, it often starts with them. Let's put that to the test. So if I build a cylinder, but often once you've built your object, you modify it, you scale it, you change it, and all the UVs go and change with it. So if I do this, scale it up, and I unwrap that object, I open my UV editor, have a look at it. Yeah. However, that's wrong, because if I select the top, you can see it's flat, and that's not good, because you know, it's got to be represented as a circle, because that's the shape of the object. So it's got to be a circle on my image. Now I can show you very quickly how to do this. I can apply a UV mapping to it. Let me just collapse that, make sure it's right. So this is, imagine this is object, we've just built it, apply UV map, unwrap it. See, what you have to do as well, you have to create scenes, but don't worry what I'm doing, don't worry about it now. I will explain all this as we go along, but what I'm doing now is I've got to tell Max where the edges of my object is. I can do that quite easily just by clicking here, and because if you're unwrapping something, if I'm taking that object and I'm unwrapping it and making it flat, that cylinder has got to unfurl and lay flat onto a 2D surface. I've got to tell it where the seam for this object is. Okay, so if I unwrap this now and open my UV editor, you'll see that the top and the bottom are represented as circles, and on my 2D image. So I can now put something circular in my 2D image in that position and it will appear there. Same for the bottom, and this is the edge all the way around. So this top layer is that whole top layer there all the way around, see? So basically that's UV mapping. So no matter what object you have, no matter how complex it is, whether it's an elephant or a giraffe, a car, tiny nuts and bolts, it all needs UV mapping. And I'm afraid sometimes it can be quite tedious. Some people love it; they absolutely love doing this work, this part of the process, and it is fun because you start to see your sort of objects, your geometry come alive when you start applying imagery onto it. But this is the process we're going to be covering next, because we need to do this in order to get it into Substance Painter and start painting onto it. I'll explain all that later when we get to it, but instead of actually applying an image, we can actually unwrap our UVs and organize them in our space, and then take that object into Substance Painter, paint onto the object, and it'll appear in the 2D imagery that we've assigned to it, basically. So it goes in with a blank image, and you can paint on the object and it'll paint into the 2D. It's really clever stuff. So basically that's UVW. That's UV mapping, and I don't know how else to describe it. I hope that's clear enough. If you have more questions, I mean, like I said, don't worry about the actual objects and how we set all this up. I'm going to show you now. We're going to show you then over the next sort of few lectures, over the next section. But it's important that you understand this concept. The concept that you can get a 2D image and you can stick it onto your 3D model, but you have to tell your model where you want the image to be applied by using UVWs, UV mapping, basically. A mathematical coordinate system for your texturing, and this is it here. You're looking at it right now. There's nothing more complex than this. That's it. We can, just like geometry, we can edit it on a vertex level, on a point level. We can edit it on a face level, on an edge level, sorry. Just like we can with our modelling, and we can edit it on a face level too. So it's exactly the same. Just think of it. UVs are for textures, XYZs are for geometry, and there's two systems there that work together to give you the imagery on your objects. Textures, basically, and I'll explain what textures and materials are in the next section, because they are two different things. So that's it for now. I hope that's clear, and I will see you in the next lecture.